Welcome back, my rogues. Today's question is workers who got their bosses fired. How? Hope you enjoy, and check me out on Instagram. The CEO publicly praised me for completing a task that my boss had struggled with. So my boss retaliated by forwarding all of his tasks to me in an effort to overwhelm me with work. I actually found his job pretty manageable, which the CEO also noticed and fired him, giving me his job in office. Mine is pretty pedestrian, but very satisfying. I was working in a garden center. I'd been there a long time and was woefully overqualified for the job I'd been doing and was therefore very valuable in that position. Think ops manager skills at admin assistant position and pay. We lost our sales manager 1 year and corporate hired a new one. Let's call her Flora. She was a real piece of work. I don't know what her interview looked like, but in person she was instantly and constantly rude and strident and mean and curt and dismissive, and that attention-seeking brand of lazy where she threw her weight around without cause, talked shit about anyone not in the room, and collected 75 of the credit for 5 of the work. She had some knowledge, I guess, but it's way easier to teach a competent manager how to grow flowers than it is to teach an asshole horticulturist how to be a human being anyway. For whatever reason, corporate loved her, so she stayed. What with one thing and another, I got another job. This process was slightly accelerated by Flora, but only a little. I'd been looking for some time, mostly waiting for the right opportunity. When I gave my 2 weeks notice, I got an email the next day scheduling my exit interview with the head of our my position didn't get exit interviews. Only managers and sometimes department supervisors did. And everyone at my store knew why I was leaving. So there was literally no reason for the store manager to pull strings to get me one. And he never said anything about it. But I knew he set it up so I could tell the head of HR, and I was very friendly with that. I was leaving because of Flora, and I did. I just laid into her. I said that Flora was the only reason I was leaving after almost 10 years with the company, during which time I wrote the company's health and safety program, trained almost every other person who did my job at other stores, made spreadsheets that got used company-wide, as well as setting audit records that still stand to this day. And all for a few pennies over minimum wage. I said I was going because she was the worst and I couldn't take it anymore. I found out later she was let go. I was thanked by most of my old workmates. My manager never said a word about it to me then, or since. He was a real log. I got my boss disbarred. He was an attorney who was a serial sexual abuser of female clients' criminal defendants. He got away with it for over 20 years and preyed upon at least 12 different victims. The Office of Attorney Regulations censured him multiple times for other offenses, like being late to pay his annual bar fees. But even though they knew about at least 5 of the victims, they wouldn't disbar him. I discovered that the Office of Attorney Regulation decides whether to pursue an action against an attorney based on a cost-benefit analysis. I gathered as much documentation of everything as I could, over a 6-month period. I took a cell phone video of her taking money from the safe and putting it in her wallet. I knew she was doing it, and I also knew that the moment it came out that money was missing, she'd blame it on me. She was so stupid that she didn't realize she should stop doing that while I was standing 10 feet away with my phone out and facing her. I've told it before, not FI had transferred. Had a squad leader make us all stand out in the Missouri winter soaking wet until someone volunteered for weekend duty. I told him I had previous cold weather injuries, frostbite. He ignored it. The corporal saw my blue feet when I took off my boots and sent me to the aid station. The doctor lost his shit and that squad leader was in another company the next day. It's not as justice bonering as getting an asshole fired, but it's the army. That's not gonna happen. Was working maintenance at an ice rink. The rule for anyone who knows how an ice rink works is if the Zamboni door's open, you get the fuck off the ice. Some dickhead decided to ignore the fact that they were open and that I was standing in the doorway, and decided to rip off one last slap shot. The puck bounced off the glass and hit me in the head. I was okay, but reported it to my boss, because we have to fill out an incident report for things like that. The boss asked, "Are you okay?" I said, "I feel okay." Then he responded with, "Well, we don't really have to report it then, do we?" I reminded him of the protocol, but it was clear he didn't want to do it. Since he wouldn't do it, I sent a descriptive email of the incident up to the administration, because I felt there should be some sort of documentation paper trail in case, God forbid, I ended up having a brain hemorrhage or something. A few days later, the boss was fired by my next shift. I quit because I was sick of her shit. On my way home, the company's president called to talk to me about what had happened. He offered me 2 weeks of paid vacation, extra vacation on top of the 5 weeks I already received, and promised she'd be home when I came back. Proved he didn't know how to do his job and was just passing my work off as his. advanced through the company through hard work and dedication and slowly began to usurp the boss duties and responsibilities. Eventually the owner realized what a lazy schmuck the old boss was and laid him off. A week later I got a new title and a 35 raise. By doing so much it started an investigation into what they were actually doing during their day. Officially she was fired for sending nudes through corporate email, but the only reason they were tracking her email was to understand what she was spending her time. 1. Turns out that was an affair. I used to be a store manager at Sneaker sporting goods store in the mall. One of my co-managers was fucking one of my teenage underage employees in that back stock room after the store closed on a regular basis. This was going on for several months apparently. I found out when said teenager came to me and she said that my co-manager promised her a raise that she never got. I asked her why he said that he would give her a raise. That is when she told me about the sex in the stock room. I had to call the police and corporate about this. We arranged a sting with help of the girl. As she acted out for the police had to meet up with my co-manager after work. Basically caught him with his pants down to use the term. I got a manager fired because he sexually harassed me on Facebook. He grabbed the back of my neck and said if you ever say I'm wrong in front of a customer again I will beat your ass. I went to the GM and told him and my supervisor was relieved of his duties. About 5 minutes later, we caught him beating his meat. My mother got this done. She worked for a starting company and her boss really needed her help. Because the boss wanted my father to invest, he owns a couple of companies. My mother would get a job as a second-rank CEO. Right under the women she got fired. In fact, the boss kept treating her like shit, so she told my father. My father told the other investors and all three of them cancelled the deal. They set up the same kind of company with my mum as only CEO. All people who worked for that former boss left and began working at the new company. He was fucking mean to us illegal. And one day, we decided that we took our revenge. We recorded him, and we showed it to his boss. All of us got fired, cause we recorded him without him knowing. She was hired as a new director, didn't know much of anything about what she claimed she did. The straw that broke the camel's back was when she stated her boss would sign anything she put in front of him because he didn't know what it was. Oops. My manager at a new job, let's call him Leo, offered to give me a ride home after a Friday night shift went overly long. Instead of turning into my street, he went to a bar about a mile in the opposite direction so we could get to know each other. I had one drink and asked to go home. Instead he bought me a second drink. I asked to go home again and he tried to assault me. The details aren't important, let's just say he was pretty aggressive. I emailed the owner of the restaurant about what had happened and went to my shift the next day. Owner was outside the restaurant firing the manager all on the word of a brand new employee head. Never even met. I was so impressed, and the rest of the mostly young female staff were very grateful for the change. That restaurant was a great place to work. 2 years later I started my first day at my dream restaurant. Did some training, sat down for pre-shifts with the kitchen and who comes out to present the specials? It's Leo, of course. He sees me and freezes up. After pre-shift he tried to talk to me about working together, but I went straight to my new manager and say I have history with a current employee that they need to know about. I tell my story. I show the emails between the owner and myself. They talk to Leo about it. He is fired again. We worked in a really specialized food style where chefs circulate through all the restaurants. He later applied to work for me when I was the hiring manager and didn't get a call back. Obviously, I'm out of the industry now, but I used to dream of getting him fired again. I want to haunt him the rest of his professional life. TL. Dr. Manager tried to take advantage of me. I reported it and got him fired. 2 years later I changed jobs to where he worked. Got him fired again. Years later reviewed his application for work. Request denied. I do not forgive or forget. Fuck Leo. I had a boss who refused to make accommodations for a disabled co-worker. Refused to keep other staff in line and basically let the disabled worker fall behind and get picked on because she, the boss, felt like she was not required to do anything else. I work for a local government agency and reported it to our HR and upper management. After they did nothing, I contacted them again to let them know I would be filing a suit with the ACLU for ADA violations. My boss was gone in 2 weeks and the rest of the staff had mandatory ADA trainings. For a while I was a project manager who got moved around from project to project as a fixer. I was moved to a project where the customer just could not be satisfied. No matter how many people, how much attention, how we bent over for them, our programs director, who should have been our advocate, would not manage the customer, and instead just hammered his employees to do more. People on our team were being let go due to failure or quitting outright due to burnout. and he was bitching that he couldn't get good people. Because of my sort of special position as General Dog Spotty, I happened to have the ear of our VP. And this project came up in casual conversation. I mentioned that it seemed funny that if the director was doing his job, how so many employees that we knew by fact and reputation were good employees had failed. A week later I heard that the director had been let go, and nothing of value was lost. I was an intern at a tech company, and in a Owner mentorship meeting my boss asked me what skill set I wanted to pursue in the future. I said that I wanted to do back-end work. This was a programming internship. He replied and said, girls aren't smart enough for that type of work. How about we put you on the QA path? You'll do better there. At the time I was so stunned that I just repeated quietly that I wanted to do back-end work. The meeting awkwardly ended after that. I always thought that I would be courageous in the face of blatant sexism if it ever happened to me. But, instead, I was silent because I was a 23-year-old who really needed that internship to turn into a real job. Fast forward a couple weeks and I was out to lunch with a few co-workers who brought along a lady who had worked at the company for years. She'd been out on contract for a while, so I hadn't met her yet. Everyone was talking about the boss and some of the stuff he had done or said to them. Mostly just rude things, so I took a chance and mentioned what happened in that meeting. She said she'd take care of it. Within a few days he was fired by the big boss. I went on my first contract doing back-end work about a month later, and I loved it. As I understand it, I was not the first person to have serious complaints about him. Just the last person. I used to work at a title company and witnessed our department manager forge mortgage documents on a fairly regular basis. So when she went to upper management to throw the entire department under the bus for being behind on recording documents, I marched straight to HR to resign and let them know what she was doing. She was fired and they called me and offered my job back before the week was out. Not my story, but my mother's. I watched on the sidelines as a teenager. My mother's job was basically a professional fundraiser. I really don't know what else to call it. People came to her for help raise money for non-profits or other foundations that needed it. This was a long time ago, before social workers were more of a mandatory thing at high schools. My high school was very poor and did not have one, so my mother took it upon herself to set up a fundraiser to pay the salary of a social worker so my high school could have one. After raising all the money, she went to talk to the principal, who flat out refused to take any of it and said the position just wasn't necessary. My mother was pretty upset and just decided she would donate the money to supplies or something like that. I honestly have no idea what she did with it, but it did go to some sort of charity. After a few months, at a Christmas party, the superintendent of all the public schools in the area was at the same party, and he struck up a conversation with my mother. After some small talk, my mother said that it was such a shame that Principal didn't take the money for the social worker's position. The superintendent was dumbstruck and then told her that he had ordered Principal to find funding for that position, and when superintendent asked him about it, he replied with, "No one is interested in that and we just couldn't get the money for it." Needless to say, he lost his position, and whenever we came back from the holiday break, the school was hiring for his position. Didn't get my boss fired because he was the owner, but I did screw him out of a high-dollar contract. A little background here: this guy was a complete asshole. He treated his customers like shit, so you can imagine how he treated his employees. This was a hydraulic repair shop. We rebuilt hydraulic cylinders, pumps, and custom-made parts, etc. I was a truck driver for this guy and the only one in the shop licensed to drive this truck. The owner wasn't even licensed. Eventually I got so sick of this asshole and made up my mind to quit. But I waited for the opportune moment to do so. My former boss was in talks with a steel company for a contract to do all their hydraulic repairs. A contract that would have landed him millions over a period of 10 years. Keep in mind, this guy was the royal definition of dickhead. My last day had to make an emergency delivery to said steel mill, and the contract hinged on this delivery. I load up the truck, then went back and clocked out and went home. My former boss called bitching wasn't there. I told him I'm tired of being treated like a fucking abused dog and slave, and that I quit, and told him good luck trying to get a CDL driver within the next hour and to fuck off. I quit. Well, he changes his tune real quick, cause now he was at my mercy and he didn't want to lose this big contract. He must have been desperate, cause he offered a raise, which, coming from this guy who never gives raises, must meant he was in a panic. About a week later I ran into a former co-worker from said hydraulic shop who had quit a week later for the same reasons. This co-worker told me the former asshole boss freaked out the whole day the day I quit and that he lost the big contract. The former co-worker also stated that 2 more guys quit within that week and the former boss couldn't figure out why no one would stay. The former co-worker and I laughed and joked, and us both thought that the former boss will never figure out no one would want to work for such a complete asshole. A decade ago a girlfriend, let's call her M, moved in with me, but she gave me a warning. There's a man that follows me. He's not evil or anything like that, but he doesn't like men. That should have been the time I knocked the F out of my own home, but I was in love and just accepted her wild statement. Fast forward a few months later. Home alone. M just left for work and I'm showering. I hear the bathroom door open and hear the dresser behind it. I look to my right and see a shadow through the curtain. I jokingly say out loud, "Oh, you're back for some bonus shower time." As I open the curtain, nobody is there, still home alone. A few days later I come home from work and hang my keys on the hook like I always do and walk away. An hour goes by when I notice my keys rocking back and forth on the hook. Minutes turn into hours as my keys keep rocking. Finally M comes home and looks at me, looks at the keys and asks how long. I just stared at her as she stops the keys as if it was as common as of not delivering on a locked safe. The two worst ones happened close together. Again I'm in the bathroom, on my knees as I scrub the tub. I feel as though someone is next to me, breathing on me. As I jerk away a hand grabs my leg and yanks me towards the bathroom door. And then nothing. That night I'm out with a group of friends. I'm telling them these same stories and at the end the light above us flickers and shuts off. As we all look up to the light my chair gets picked up and thrown into the table. I turn around to scold the jackass behind me but nobody was there. Everyone just stared at me with shocked looks on their faces because they just witnessed the man. The finale. It's late and M is downstairs in bed. I'm turning off the lights as I hear our laundry room door close and footsteps leading to the bedroom. My brain is thinking M is awake, so I go to the bedroom. I open the door to the sound of her softly snoring. I turn around and am hit with the loveliest smell I have ever experienced. It's the smell of my late Nana's home. Her perfume is everywhere. After that moment the man was gone. It's like she came into the home and removed his presence. I can't explain it. All I know is that I haven't smelled that scent in well over 20 years and I doubt he'll ever smell it again. TLDR, I had a ghost that haunted me and my late Nana made it disappear. Our manager spent her whole shift in the office watching us on camera, and if we so much as stopped to talk to each other she'd come out and yell at us to get back to work. She was completely immature. One time I left my water bottle at the front counter and my coworker had to stop her from purposefully throwing it away. She would make up rules on the spot if she didn't like something someone did. I could go on. She was a terrible, unfriendly, hypocritical, mean manager. Honestly, we all just went to the owners and told him everything and how it made us feel. They got HR involved and got her fired and found out she may have been stealing or giving away product. It was such a relief. If you work for a small business, just be honest with the owners. If management isn't family. Sorry Fauci, I don't think we can help you. He was always slacking off. He'd go and do a 15-minute task, and be gone 2 hours. He'd have to shoot off early for a doctor's appointment, or a dentist appointment, always with no prior warning and whenever he was obviously bored. This was, mind you, within weeks of the new shop opening, all of us being hired. I was young and went along with it for a while. My colleague was in her 40s and vaguely knew him anyway, so was not standing for it. She reported him repeatedly to our area manager, who decided to come down to speak to him about it. AM rung in the morning, told him to stay in the shop today, and send one of us out for anything that needed doing. He said he had something to do, but his boss said nope, need you in the shop. Somehow he didn't get the obvious message and went out anyway. The AM came down and he was gone. My manager wouldn't answer his phone all day. AM was pissed. At the end of the day when we were closing up, he walked past, posted his keys through the door, and I never saw him again. Didn't even attempt to argue his case. Not my manager, but I got a project manager who worked with my team fired when it was obvious he didn't understand the business domain and put no work into understanding it or even breaking down the problems with the team. During a stakeholder meeting, we were asked about the game plan for tackling the project. He spewed some nonsense, and I asked what the actual plan was in detail. When he tried to come up with BS to explain that the problem is very complex and there is no clear path to building the project, that sealed his fate. So one day, my boss told me to step in his office for accidentally sleeping on the job. His wife called him during his lecturing, however, and he left the office for a bit. I was alone in the room. Now, I waited for 5 minutes until I decided to look at his computer when I saw busty college girls in his bookmarks. I took a photo and showed human resources. The next day he was packing his stuff and I got off easy. Although after that I never slept on the job again. F in the chat for my previous boss. I can't take credit for getting him fired, but I have a good story. My former manager was a bloody moron. None of my co-workers liked him. He was rude, a bully, and didn't know what he was doing. I made an HR complaint a few months after starting there, so I feel like I helped build a case at least found out from long-term workers that he had many reports on his file already for various things, including a harassment. One day, we were just told he wouldn't be back. He was there the day prior. The complaint that finally got him fired didn't come from me. But you'll love part A. This in February he was casually speaking with a Chinese employee about coronavirus, and the manager referred to COVID-19 as Kung Flu. Employee complained, and asked for apology. The manager refused to even apologize, saying the employee could quit if he didn't want to work for him. Employee quit, and the manager was fired, after several years at the company. Fuck that guy. We went to have a beer on our breaks, and since he was management, he got fired for it. His wife thinks he was cheating on her with me, and HR thought he forced me to drink a beer with him. I was the who offered to grab a drink. Is everything okay at your workplace? Not fired, but moved stores and demoted. He posted publicly on his Facebook asking why so many of his staff have mental problems. He also posted a few weeks before that he was having a cheeky snow day and skipping work. I reported it myself, considering I had been on a final written warning for breaking the social media policy. I don't see why he shouldn't be either. Called the head office and suggested that they do a random drug test on him. He constantly treated me like shit, said horrible things about me behind my back to literally all of my co-workers, and said racist things to my one black co-worker. I knew for a fact he was always on coke, so fuck him. You make me lose my job, he'll make you lose yours. Sounds like most bosses get themselves fired. I worked at a bar and I caught my supervisor giving her and her friends free drinks and taking bottles home. They reviewed the CCTV and found she was also dealing drugs from behind the bar, and she was fired. The next day, I quit. I went through everything in my exit interview. How my reviews were always shit, so she didn't have to give me a raise. But that I had emails telling me how great that same work was throughout the year. How I was written up because someone heard me say something mean. She couldn't tell me what it was, because she wouldn't repeat it. HR never heard anything about it. She also did that write-up by herself, instead of with another member of management per the company handbook. She also told me to work 80 hours a week just because she wanted me to order that I should find a new job. I refused to, and then I got a new job within the weeks, then turned in my 2 weeks. I also talked about how she threatened my job, because I found out about her and a few other people changing reports to get them all of their bonuses. I got to meet with everyone about the shit she was pulling, except for the people that were in on the editing of reports. I met with the COO, CFO, VP of HR, and all of the legal team. After I left, she was immediately moved to a new department and then let go within 3 months. Also, the people that were changing reports were either let go or demoted. I do feel bad for leaving that job though. Within a year that department was fully let go, so my friends all lost their jobs. Caught them stealing, recorded it, went over their heads. When they fired me, I said no you. I didn't get him fired per se, but something I was involved in did. I was testing welds in the bullnose area of a power boiler and basically a 20-piece of steel boiler tube with 58 membrane welded to each side, so it looked like a huge axe fell and just about chopped me in half. I reported the incident to my boss, the night shift supervisor, and he said we would take care of it. I had to fill out a report myself, which I handed off to the safety lead when he showed up in the morning. My boss never reported anything. He lost his job the next day for mishandling the situation. It wasn't his first strike. I had a job that required my supervisor to be doing evaluations of my cases and charts. She just hadn't. In months, she and my director ordered me and my co-workers to do our own chart audits, fill out the forms, and they would sign off. I was so tired of not having adequate supervision. Staff meetings weekly where she yelled at us, and invariably someone cried due to the stress and lack of support, and not having been paid enough to do everything I was doing in their job. I refused. I was told to do it or I would be fired. No. So I got fired. On the way out to my car, I called my former director who had moved to another agency. She set up an interview for the next day and I had a new job within 24 hours. She asked me what had happened at that interview. I spilled all the tea. Her sister-in-law was on the board of the previous agency, so she called her and I told her everything. 2. Director was fired and supervisor was reprimanded and put on close monitoring. She had killed any chance of promotion and left shortly afterwards. I heard. I was just happy to have jumped ship from that toxic mess. I should have left months earlier. My manager, who also managed a few other direct reports, was incompetent. He made it through his interview rounds and was hired by the skin of his teeth. And also that we're in an industry that doesn't necessarily have a lot of candidates. He played that to his advantage. He made it a year or two before the foundation started to crumble on his smokescreen. He then had a personal event come up in his life and he was unable to juggle his work and personal lives. He simply couldn't keep up the charade while also taking care of whatever was going on at home. The trust of his workers was already crumbling. Then his event happened and it fell apart from there. Long story short, his direct reports, myself included, catalogued nearly everything he did and told us, and staged something of a mini mutiny. He was a great person but a terribly manager, and billings collections were not being done properly, either not done or incorrectly, which impacts the bottom line. So we risked in the future not getting paid. It took several months and we all did our jobs, but he was eventually let go. It was not easy as an employee working for him. It was no longer a working with relationship to move the company forward, but everything was delegated out and he took no responsibility for anything, always losing emails, drop promises, late for meetings. The list goes on. At the end of the day, we needed someone who could lead, and he wasn't that. Spent a year compiling various things against her, and turned it over to the EOC. I brought the issues up to HR, they ignored it. When it went to mediation, one of my requests is she get fired, and at first they objected, but I stood firm. She was a racist, openly making racist statements against customers, openly discriminating against any customer that wasn't white, and making horrible statements against my kids who are biracial. Bye Felicia. I work for the federal government and we have a yearly review for all employees to fill out where you can rank your management. Enough people complained that it caught someone's attention and they sent in auditors to investigate. Our boss was incompetent and cost us necessary funding because they simply weren't doing their job. What got him fired in the end, though, was time fraud. Auditors found it when doing the general investigation about the complaint. Every time my family moves to a new house, I always see a strange human figure. It's like Peter Pan's shadow, but it looks like it has no clothes, no hair, and it's just a blank back figure. I worked for a pharma company and my supervisor was always a dick to me. On one of my annual reviews, he put that I had changed the parameters on one of our pieces of equipment so that it was out of spec. It's a lot more complicated, but I refused to sign my review and basically proved that it didn't happen. Now, everything was documented there, including our reviews, and him submitting false information on my review was a fireable offense. I ended up quitting right after I got him fired because basically everyone there was shitty like that. He confided in me that he was banging a staff member, told me he would stop about a year later. HES still doing it and everyone pretty much knows. He keeps promoting her. I sent in a few anonymous tips to HR, which led to a few investigations and ultimately his dismissal. Every person in my department filed multiple complaints about our incompetent director. CEO finally got the message it would be cheaper and easier to fire and replace him than it would be to fire and replace all 50 of us. Unfortunately, the guy that replaced the shitty former director was not an improvement, so I found a better job and quit. My current boss is awesome. He called me a bitch over text. Owner fired him. Did their job better in every way and basically made it pointless for there to be two of us. I had proven myself as a competent management level employee. She, on the other hand, showed favoritism, broke rules, set schedules nobody could work, and all around didn't give a shit as assistant manager. When the manager left, she assumed she was a shoo-in. After all, she was the assistant manager, so why wouldn't she be promoted? We both got called into a meeting. The district deputy told us both that I was going to be the new manager, and she lost her shit. I never saw her again. And quickly after, all her relatives that worked there quit mysteriously. Worked at a caregiving company. Boss showed up on my shift drunk to flirt with my co-worker that was 20 years younger than her. Reported her to HR. I don't want to go too deep into it, but basically my boss got into a yelling match with a customer who was correct about some handicap seat laws. I worked at a movie theater. My boss was dead wrong about it and we all knew it, so I wrote down some contact info to his boss. Told the guy my boss's name. A few weeks later my boss was cleaning out his office, which was when I quit, as the new management was a woman who had never worked in a movie theater before and we were always busy, so she forgot a ton of vital stuff. Pro revenge. I told supervisors that my direct boss was stealing so much product and time from the store. I knew it. Her stories didn't add up. She was never helping us on the floor, always in her office, would take 1.5-hour lunch breaks and not clock out. Leave early. Tell me she was coming in early when the store didn't open until 9, which I knew was shit because she didn't have a store key. I told him for about 8 months. No one followed up on it. I didn't get her fired, per se, but I basically made her unable to get rehired or not able to use us as a reference. I got promoted to her position after she left, and I found thousands of dollars worth of empty boxes shoved in the back of her desk drawers. I'm sure she was taking cash from the register. 2. POS.
Hope you liked this video. Stay frosty, my rebels.